Hello again, and welcome to another episode of the Fun Fans Podcast. I'm your host, James Dillard. With me, as always, my co-host, Bailey Jackson. How you doing, Bailey?
Well, I'm good. I'm okay.
Bailey's good. It's good.
The sun
It's
came
all
up
good. We're
today.
going to have a great show.
That's right.
We're going to talk about the final tailgate of the season in the Valley this past Saturday. The tailgate always finished undefeated. Yesterday was a crazy day for Clemson and South Carolina fans, as well as many other fan bases, and we're going to talk about that. But that's just part of being a fan, and that's why we love it. And I have something very special for everyone at the end of this show, so let's get started. The Fun Fans are a proud part of Greenville Sports Media Podcasting Network. If you're a true sports fan, Greenville Sports Media is perfect for you. Find various nationwide podcasts, the latest articles, and other sports media at greenvillesportsmedia.com. We can also be found on all forms of social media, just like the Fun Fans. The Fun Fans Podcast is the official podcast for Clemson fans.
Yeah, and we'd like to thank Rubens always, Food, Sports, Spirits, and Catering, the best wings around, with 2 locations in the upstate, 1083 Batesville Road in Greer and 11028 Anderson Road in Piedmont. You can find them at rubensc.com. Rubens is simply a great place to eat for all sports fans.
The Fun Fans Podcast is also brought to you by Ivy O'Sullivan Healthcare Services. At Ivy O'Sullivan, they are more than just chiropractors. Since 1977, this family-owned business located in downtown Spartanburg has been helping people with techniques other than typical twisting and popping that can sometimes make people nervous about trying a chiropractor. I've been a patient my entire life, and I take my own children there as well. If you have an ache or pain, give Ivy O'Sullivan Healthcare a try. And if you mention the Fun Fans Podcast, they will donate 100% of your initial evaluation costs to their charity of the month. So call them at 864-583-3967 or find them at ivyosullivan.com to feel better and function at your best. All right, so we're going to let this music fade out. I'm doing all my production stuff here, getting a little bit backwards. So we did have the grand finale tailgate. And Bailey, when it first started out, it was a little bit chilly. So that's why I'm sporting the toboggan here.
I was going to ask you if your head was cold right now, but yeah, that was definitely something that came in handy yesterday morning. It was cold.
It was cold, but Bailey and I decided that we would rather start off hour and a half, couple hours, pretty chilly, and then it was nice after that. Versus some of those games you guys remember when the season started, which seems like just yesterday. I can't believe the regular season is over, but it was super hot.
Oh my gosh.
It's at the beginning of the season.
It's brutal. I would rather be cold.
Yeah. Rather be cold. So we had a great tailgate. So here was we lit us a fire. That's my youngest, senior in high school. So these two right here, speaking of they've got some decisions to make. This is we had recruits, they bring the recruits in. These are the recruits, right? And we had some other recruits. So the Sheehy family stopped by. I hadn't seen those guys in a long time. They've got a child that's a senior in high school. So it was like a recruit stopped by, and my brother. And his son's a senior in high school. So it was good to see them at the tailgate. I'm glad they were there at the same time. And we had 4. We needed one more to have. We were talking about playing a pickup game, Bailey, but we definitely would have been. We were reminiscing all the years of Fike, but we would have had to shorten it to half court. I think was the decision if we would have ended up playing.
Yeah, with that crowd, I mean the bellies are bigger and the hair is less.
Yeah,
let me just tell you.
Yeah, but it was really great that they were there, and like I say, great that they were there at the same time. And then, of course, the Lee family is right up the road from us, and they're there about every time. And you had a crew. It was an interesting group a couple times it came by.
Yeah, we had our whole crew there, and then Katie had a friend, Devin, one of her good friends from college, and her mom came by, and then we had some other folks pop in, and so it was a good time, and got to see a lot of people, and you always see a lot more fans from the other school when you play Carolina, and that's not a bad thing. Everybody's friends.
Yeah, it was great.
And I mean, it was unbelievable atmosphere even before the game.
Yeah, before the game, and I thought it was cool. Last year, Katie, Bailey's daughter, she'd only been at the tailgate for a little bit, but then not only this year, she's been able to hang out with us longer. She's helping coach cheer, and some of her athletes stopped by, so that was kind of neat.
Yeah, like half
Again,
the team. And they're fresh off their fourth place finish in the Division I 5A
right.
state championships.
Yeah, that
So
was kind of neat. So, and I agree with Bailey. I was going to point that out as well on the trips to the Porta John. You get a vibe for the environment, at least around where we were. It's like you say, almost every tailgate had one or two, if not half, Carolina fans. And, before the game starts, everybody's friends.
yeah,
It was great. I mean, you could tell everybody was having a good time, and that's what it's all about. And so glad, 12 o'clock game, there were people like us that got there in plenty of time to tailgate, but we did see some traffic, probably some people blowing horns and stuff that wish they would have got there a little bit earlier.
yeah. I mean, if you waited till, I don't know, 9:45, 10 o'clock, you were in a parking lot.
Yeah.
For the most part. And then, I think Katie had a 9-minute drive in the Uber that she got, and it took 38 minutes or something like that. So,
Yeah, those Ubers on game day I'm sure they're convenient, but they're not anything lickety split for sure.
no, they
And if
don't
you're
have their
wondering
own
what
lane.
Bailey's keeping an eye on the soccer game, Clemson is in what round is this? We're deep in the playoffs or something, right? In soccer.
Yeah, we've gone full time, and it's 1-1.
All right, so
It is the
Bailey's
third
he'll
round,
be
and they're
keeping
playing
us.
Wake Forest, who is, if there is two evenly matched teams as it could possibly be, it's Wake Forest and Clemson. So,
All right, so he'll keep us updated on that as we go through the show. So as we move towards the game, just to point out some more things that this game, in my opinion, is the definition, the epitome of what college football is all about. The stadium was packed. The bands were blasting. The fans were loud. It was a close, tight game. It had national postseason implications, just like everybody knew going into it. And it was a really good game. Of course, you hate to be on the losing side of the game, whether it was a close game or not. But just from the standpoint, I can't complain. I'm just going to point out that personally, this is when I'm one of the few fans that ask for this. When I say, I don't pull against South Carolina. I want the game to mean something at the end of the season. And, maybe I'm changing my mind to rather win. But I'm definitely not.
I mean, obviously, you wouldn't be a fan if you didn't want to win.
Right, for sure.
But they made one more, even at the end, we were driving down the field, and it's kind of a ball that, hey, if it gets batted down instead of tipped up in the air, maybe it doesn't get picked off. Maybe we kick a field goal and we're in overtime, or we take a shot at the end zone. But, it's one of those things. That's why you play the game. That's why I've been telling, I've been saying all year, I thought Carolina was really good, and they are.
They are.
And they have probably one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And we know from experience what that can do for you. So, he is another generational type quarterback. And
he's on another level.
He is good. And I know folks that actually, a guy I used to work with was an assistant principal when he was in middle school, and he said he's the best guy on the planet. I said, well, good, because I wouldn't want him to be a bad person, because he took control of the game, and he won the game. And that's what great players do, and that's what he is. So, all you can do is give them credit. They won the game.
Yep, they were one play bet, like I think you've said already. They were definitely one play better than us, and at least on yesterday. And you could go back and nitpick this, that, or the other, but if we make one or two more plays in that game, it's a different outcome. But we didn't, and like you say, give them credit. And yeah, Sellers it reminded me of when we would play against Lamar Jackson. Sellers is bigger though.
Newton.
He's even harder to tackle. Right. Even if you get your hands on, it's hard to get your hands on Lamar.
6'3", 240.
Yeah, but you get your hands on Sellers, and that really doesn't mean a whole lot. The difference, I think, when Lamar was at Louisville was when we had Deshaun. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So as a quarterback against quarterback, but like I say, I'm not going to question, the coaches. I'm sure they're questioning themselves. The players are questioning themselves. The Gamecocks are enjoying their victory, and they've got another year of bragging rights. And we just got to, the only, we definitely want to talk about this more in a second, but we're still playing. So we got to lick our wounds and move on to the next game. And You know what it takes to move on?
Dubby.
It takes energy. Go to w.gg and enter promo code FUNFANS for 10% off of your jitterless energy. I think Sellers must have drank some W at halftime. I mean, he's like a different player at halftime. But anyway, people are saying, and of course, we're the Tigers. And now Clemson has 9 lives.
Right.
So
I mean,
Clemson,
really, in reality, you had a game yesterday that was for basically a playoff spot. Maybe, you never know. You
never
never
know.
know.
Right.
But now it is in your own hands.
Yep.
Officially. Win and pretty much in.
Yes.
So hey, the new system, I mean, I don't think Clemson deserves to be in the college football playoff, but what I would say about the game yesterday and other games that I've witnessed this weekend, and we're going to talk about them, I'm sure. ACC football is really not that bad, everybody. All along, I think the Carolina fans thought it was just going to be a cakewalk because we played in the ACC. Well, Clemson is yes, just happens to be in the ACC, but also a team that pretty good. Louisville
Pretty good.
Beat the mess out of Kentucky. Georgia Tech took Georgia to 8 overtimes, etc.
Yes.
So, it's really not that bad. It could be bad at the bottom, but it's not that bad. It's just really not.
Well, and we've said before, and we give the SEC credit that they are the best conference, but they're not so much better than any other conference that it needs to be some kind of big deal, big difference. And like you said, maybe we'll touch on that again in a minute. But speaking of clinching the ACC trip to the ACC Championship, so that'll be coming up this Saturday against SMU. Now, first of all, what does SMU stand for? We need to know I wonder if fans know what SMU stands for.
Southern Methodist University.
Southern Methodist University. They're out of Texas.
Right in the heart of Dallas. I've been right by their stadium. One of my friends used to coach receivers there.
Yeah, so let's point out what some people might not realize about SMU. They just came from a group of 5. If you don't know tell them the history of SMU.
In the early
what we were
80s,
talking about the other day.
In the early 80s, they were loaded. And they were doing NIL before it was legal. And they got in trouble. They got the death penalty. I mean, it was so severe, they got the death penalty. Well, now those Texas oil men that funded the initial SMU scandal, it's now okay for them to fund it.
Yes.
All right. So SMU's got, they are the first year they've been in the conference, and they've got plenty of talent.
First year in Power 5, but it's not, at least to the school, and probably a lot of people still tied to the school. This isn't new to them. They're not new to winning. They're not new to being on a big stage. Of course, the coaching staff and the players, it's new, but they've been building this back up since they came off the death penalty, I guess 20 or 30, how many years ago. And
Chad Morris was the head football coach there.
His springboard, the NIL and transfer portal has springboarded those guys. They were legit last year.
Right.
12 playoff. Would they have been one of the teams in last year? Maybe. Anyway, but we're going to match up with those guys. So what do we think? They're super athletic. They have a running quarterback. He's not as big as Sellers.
Yeah, they don't have Lenore Sellers.
Yeah, so hopefully we can tackle him and that won't be the issues. But you think we match up well against them or what? I watched film.
I haven't dug deep enough into it. I've been, hadn't really thought about it today. It is odd that, we're so devastated last night and, that we get home and I said weeks ago that they still had to play Syracuse at Syracuse, the last game of the year. And they've been playing with fire all year anyway.
Yes.
So, Good job, Syracuse.
Yeah, and I love the coach's quotes after the game. I mean, I never heard anything from him. He seems like a trip. He gave a shout out didn't give a shout out to Dabo. He's like, "You're welcome, Dabo. Got you in." But
Wake Forest just scored.
Just a real quick, we can sit here and talk about the scenario forever. But if you're keeping up with the playoffs and I see this the way this is going. We won't let it play out before I'm not being critical. I like 12-team playoff, and I like the way they have it set up. If you want to get a diversified group of folks have opportunity, we can sit here and rank people all we want, but until you put some stuff on the field, the whole point is to not have the same teams that have already played each other, or even one, this team who's played that team, blah, blah, blah. You want to get some people from around the country, from different conferences in, and that's what's happening. And there's probably going to be, but if Clemson wins, Clemson won't be in the top 12, and they'll make the playoffs.
Right.
Somebody from the Big 12, Iowa State, we'll talk about this in a minute, but there's going to be at least one team that's not in the top 12 that's going to make the 12-team playoff. And but that's Clemson's scenario is they have to win. If they win where they're ranked, there's no way. I mean, there's just no way. It would be some kind of crazy falling in the polls.
Right.
And else, thanks to Tulane.
Right.
Now that Tulane is lost. And that's another thing about this 12-team playoff is it has made way more games here at the end of the season relevant. There's no way the Tulane game would have been worth watching if it wasn't for the scenario like this.
Right.
Same thing for a lot of the other games. So let's just go through these real quick. So the SEC, I got a graphic up here. If you're doing audio only, we got the graphic. So Georgia's playing Texas. Once again, we talked about the SEC. So a team from the Big 12 comes in the first year and they're playing in your conference. I mean, come on now. Y'all are good. Y'all are the best conference, but not like that much better than everybody else. Give me a break.
Right.
Oregon and Penn State. Penn State backs their way into Ohio State, man.
I'm not mad at them because that's exactly what the Tigers did.
They just, oh, man. Yeah, Ohio State just, I don't know. It was a meltdown. They're a way better team than, if you would look at them versus Michigan. They were favored by 21 points or something. It was crazy. But, hey, it's like you said, that's why they play the games. SMU coming into the ACC and going to play Clemson, thanks to Syracuse in that championship. And then this is the other one that's going to make the 12-team playoff interesting. Arizona State, Iowa State. So the winner of that game right now, Arizona State in the new AP poll, I think goes up to 12. So they may get around 12 in the college football playoff poll. But Iowa State is around 16, 18, 15, something like that. So, I mean, if Iowa State wins that game, they're definitely going to be not in the top 12, but they're going to be in the top 5 conference champions, assuming Boise is the 4 you see on the screen, and Boise or UNLV, whoever wins that game.
Right.
So UNLV might be another team that's outside the top 12. You might have 2. You could possibly
become more of a March Madness type situation.
And is that not great? I mean, isn't that awesome? You're still going to get the teams that are really deserving, the top 4, the top 6, the people that are no question they need to be the top, 6 or 7 teams in the country and need to have a shot to play for a national championship. But you're going to throw these other teams in the mix to give them a chance. I mean, you never know. So that's going to be fun. SMU opens at a 2.5-point favorite.
Right.
And just FYI, Oregon opens at a 3. And we don't talk because we don't gamble. It's a family show. But I saw Oregon opens at a 3.5-point favorite over Penn State. And if I were to bet, I mean, to me, that's a lock.
That is a lock.
Yeah. I think Oregon's going to beat Penn State by more than four points for sure.
Right. And that game, I think, is in Indianapolis inside where Oregon's even faster.
Just go crazy. Go crazy. All righty. So one more thing real quick about the playoffs. SEC, both of those teams are going to be in. Big Ten, both of those teams are going to be in the playoffs. So that's another thing that makes the ACC and the Big 12 championships, even more interesting. Talk about SMU. If Clemson wins, falling out, maybe they do, maybe they don't. Who knows? But that's going to make all those games even more interesting. So that's awesome. We've already talked about the SEC being not all that crazy much better. And another, just to point out, it's like you were saying, if Clemson is supposedly so weak and we're in such a weak conference, but we came within one play. And Gamecocks are good. They're good. They're playing as good as anybody else in the country. And we came within. The thing is, you can't have it both ways. You can't say, "Oh, we're high and mighty," and then you can't prove it on the field. Like Georgia going to overtime against Georgia Tech. You can't be high. That's the top team in the conference.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, I mean, it is what it is. It's just the world we live in. These schools are getting transfers and people transferring out. Their commitments are flipping because they're getting more money somewhere else. I mean, it's just a joke right now, and it does create a more even playing field.
Yes, it creates some parity, and we talked about that, which is another thing to, kind of evens the playing field. I think even Saban said a few weeks ago on TV, the College Game Day, the portal and everything is making it harder to have depth. The big schools, the traditional powerhouse schools, is making it harder for those schools to have depth because those kids want to go and they want to play. They want to start and they want to play. So they're leaving. So that does even the playing field a lot. So just a reminder that no conference champion is guaranteed a spot. I mean, it's still based on the rankings. If something crazy happened and the committee just decided they wanted to put Army back in there and they finished ahead of Iowa State or Clemson or something in the polls, then Iowa State or Clemson could win and still get left out. But I don't, just the way things have been going, the way things are ranked right now, I don't see that happening. But none of these are automatic bids. So I keep seeing that, and even people that's supposed to know kind of don't know that. But anyway.
Somebody needs to tell Joe Tessitore that. He was the play-by-play guy on the Georgia game the other night.
I don't think they
He's like guaranteed. I mean, yes, Georgia is guaranteed a spot. I'm just, they are.
Right.
However, they're not guaranteed a spot technically.
Correct. There are no guarantees. They're in, but there's no guarantee that they're in. And speaking of leveling the playing field and people just leaving, so this past week Dabo came out, and there are a lot of changes. We hadn't talked about the rosters having to be cut and the walk-on situation and all that stuff that every team had to go through. And then July 1st, there's some changes it's when the revenue share starts. And that's a whole new ball game. And Dabo, the clip from the interview, he comes out and is like, no one's going to have any more money than Clemson. Do you have any idea how in the world all of a sudden Clemson's going to be the school with the most money, or even just as much as anybody else?
Well, I'm gonna table this discussion till I can do some research.
Okay. Well, let me throw out.
I know, but I don't want to be wrong.
Well, I'm going to say why I don't know, and then we'll see what happens when we get to research. Obviously, the SEC and the Big Ten have it. They're saying revenue share. So where is that money coming from? I'm assuming that's the TV revenue, because that's the word they use when they talk about these TV deals.
Well, everybody's going to hire somebody from the NFL. Okay, teams are basically going to have general managers now. Okay, some schools are already hiring them. Like Georgia Tech hired a guy from the NFL. And then somebody else I heard hired one, because the NFL's been revenue sharing for years. Where you can't, like in baseball, they don't do that. So the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Mets, they can, and the Dodgers, they can outbid everybody for players.
Right.
But in the NFL, there are salary caps. There's everybody's equal. A small market like Green Bay is just like Dallas.
So even though the ACC, this is what I was wondering, the ACC has the much smaller, what everybody talked about, TV deal. That's why everybody's wanting to jump conferences and stuff. The SEC, the Big Ten, gets the big money. It's like $40 million more dollars.
That's why I need to look into it. I was okay.
Well, that's why it's confusing to me.
Revenue sharing worked,
right? Okay.
And how I'm just telling you, every major college is going to have a dude that they hire.
Well, I believe it. I just want to know where the revenue's coming from. How all of a sudden Clemson and too, he said, and it'll have NIL on top of that. And if we top of NIL, then obviously it seems like Michigan right now is the top of the NIL because they're getting everybody.
Yeah, let's talk briefly about Michigan.
Yeah,
I talked to another friend of mine who was at the Ohio State Michigan game, and he is a huge Ohio State fan. And he was in the airport in Columbus. And he said, this has been the worst 24 hours of my life. because that is a rivalry. He said the best part of that game was the fight afterwards. So see, that is what I like to call a segue, James,
Segue.
into the next topic.
The next topic, because we're influencers, we're going to ask, what's the deal with the fighting? Well, I mean, it's it's rivalry week. This didn't happen last year.
Right.
It would be an isolated incident in the past. I don't know how many. I don't know if there's ever been one week where there's been this many fights after the game, on the same week.
Yeah, I mean it goes back. So, for example, Clemson. I had another friend of mine wanted to know why his buddies weren't allowed on the field to gather at the Paul.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, I'm going to imagine that it's because the Carolina flag they were trying to plant the Carolina flag in the middle of the field. And that's all I saw because I was walking up the steps to leave.
We were going that way.
out. But it just goes back. We've talked about this a million times. It's not a good idea. It's never a good idea. Gathering at the Paul can be a thing. It can be a former thing because all that's going to happen. But because then you get the players doing it. So the players are bad enough. Then what if you have all the fans out there in the middle of all the players? Then it becomes this ugly scene.
Yeah.
Ugly. And
so at Clemson, what I heard the guy beside me saying, I think he said they're fighting, but they're pushing and shoving. And from what I've seen, there was some pushing and shoving, but I don't think there were any punches thrown.
No.
And one thing, and if something's gonna, even though I don't like it, I think there's ways to regulate it or whatever. But if you're a student, these kids, I'm missing old man talk, kids nowadays, you run out onto a field with your phone up in the air and you're talking trash to a player that just lost.
Right.
Some big, 275 pound, 6'4" defensive end. And you're Johnny, little college boy. And you can say what you want in the stands and you can say what you want on social media, but you run your mouth right there in some player's face with you, especially one boy got his phone smacked out of his hand. That's all I saw at Clemson. And I saw another Clemson player pull another, probably a Carolina student. I don't know, he was a young guy, away from, like you say, maybe they were planting the flag or whatever.
Because it's just it's just not a good situation.
Those are
we
bad
have got
ideas.
To figure out a way to keep people off the field. I'm just telling you.
Bad ideas if you're allowed on or you sneak on the field, because there are repercussions in the real world for stuff like that. But NC State, North Carolina, some pushing and shoving at minimum, maybe whatever, a little more at Clemson, South Carolina. Michigan and Ohio State, obviously, they were the ones that got all the publicity, it seems, and they ended up getting maced. Some of the players got maced, so they didn't want to stop. I mean, they were really going at it. And I feel like I'm leaving one out. But the North Carolina State one, look back, some kid ended up on the ground, and he was not doing well at the bottom of that pile.
It's just not a good situation.
For sure. So that could be, and we could get into all the differences, and maybe we can table that discussion. So what's different about this year? Old men like me, anybody that's going to really think about it, the difference is we're paying the players. And I've said this on the show before. They talk about wanting to be employees. Be careful what you ask for.
Right.
Employees act like that. There are repercussions. We're going to start.
It
right.
It's just, I'm telling you, dude, I have gone out to the field as a high school athletic director. If the game was out, kind of chippy and a lot of penalties, and I've stood at the middle of that field and said, send them to the locker room. We are not shaking hands. Because both ADs would sit there and go, yeah, let's just don't shake hands. Yep. And both head coaches would agree because it's more of an issue. I can deal with people going, oh, that's unsportsmanlike. Well, it's really not. What it is preventative.
It's right. It's preventative.
And I don't. It doesn't matter if you call me unsportsmanlike because that's not the intent. But I would just say, go to the locker room. And that's one way you just don't have any issues.
Yep. These are. If times are changing, and they're going, if you're an employee, you're going to be or getting paid at all.
Right.
Some repercussions could potentially be fines because you can't. Maybe the season's over, maybe they're portal, whatever. So you can't suspend a kid or whatever, but they're going to end up getting a fine. All right, so we're running short on time. The season is over, but I put together something very special, like I said at the beginning, that even Bailey hadn't seen. You ready?
Ready.
It's like a year in review. Here we go. All right, so if you're audio only, we'll post that on our social media. Hope Bailey, did you enjoy that?
I did. Little recap.
I like our little best hair cam.
Yeah,
we had to make that up ourselves. And the hurricane damage in the Porta John. That was the blue dye. FYI, if you see that picture, that wasn't Porta mess.
Yeah,
it was the blue dye. But when the hurricane had blown over.
I mean, let's think about this. We did have a game 2 days or a day after a hurricane.
Yeah. They had blown over most of the Porta Johns.
Correct.
And they didn't come refill the. Well, again, maybe they did, but it had the blue dye.
The insides were clean. So.
It was all clean. Awesome. All right. Well, we hope you enjoyed the show. Congrats to our friends in Columbia. Even I was proud of their band. If you're listening, if you're people sitting in front of me, I really was proud of the Carolina band and the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Championship Saturday is on the way, and Rubens will be a great place to be to watch the games. And come on, players, behave, for crying out loud. Thanks again for checking us out each and every Sunday. Don't forget to click subscribe on the Fun Fans Podcast YouTube channel, as well as your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on all social media, and please share. Reach out to become a sponsor on behalf of the Fun Fans Podcast. Jay Thriller Entertainment, Greenville Sports Media, and Bailey Jackson.
Hey, big week for Clemson Tiger basketball. Tuesday night, 9:30, Little John, Kentucky. Number 8 team in the country. SEC ACC Challenge. Saturday, first conference game with Miami.
Big time week coming. Go Tigers.